The Christmas banquet was supposed to project unity, tradition, and royal strength. Instead, one glittering object brought the entire celebration to a stunning halt. Princess Catherine had barely entered the grand reception when she looked across the room and froze. Resting on Queen Camilla's head was the wedding tiara forever linked to Diana. Catherine's expression changed. The music continued for only seconds longer, because the princess was about to make a decision no guest expected. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine moved forward without hesitation. Beside her, William felt shock harden into anger, because he knew this was not merely a jewel. The Christmas banquet, a gathering where senior royals, officials, foreign guests, and charity representatives met, had been designed to prove the family could stand together after months of strain. Yet the princess had entered believing every piece selected for the evening had been cleared by the Heritage Office, the palace team responsible for protecting historic objects and controlling when they could be worn. William had also been assured that nothing tied to Diana would appear. He watched Catherine study the tiara, and he understood the wound behind her silence. To him, it carried the memory of his mother's wedding, her public hope, and the private pain that followed. To Catherine, allowing Camilla to wear it without challenge would turn that memory into decoration. Camilla remained seated. She expected the princess to recover and accept the choice rather than fracture the evening before so many witnesses. Then Catherine reached the head steward, the official directing the banquet, and gave a quiet order. The musicians stopped. Conversations broke apart. The queen consort lifted her chin, but her confidence faded when she realized Catherine had chosen confrontation over silence. "No toast will be given while that tiara remains in this room," Catherine said. The words were controlled. Their meaning was not. William stepped closer to his wife, making his support unmistakable, while Camilla gripped her chair and refused to rise. Every royal close enough to hear understood that the banquet had become a test of memory, marriage, and power. Charles received the message moments later. The king set down his glass, looked toward Camilla, and asked, "Who authorized it?" Camilla opened her mouth, but no answer came. William then noticed the palace curator near the doorway, shaken. That reaction told the prince something had been hidden. As the doors closed and Christmas celebration turned into royal interrogation, one question divided the room. Had Camilla worn Diana's tiara through ignorance, or because she believed no one would dare stop her? The confrontation was not simply about diamonds, protocol, or a disputed item from the royal collection. It was about three women connected by one wound the palace had never fully healed. Diana had become an absence powerful enough to shape every room. Camilla had spent years trying to escape that shadow. Catherine had inherited the responsibility of protecting it. And now, beneath Christmas lights and forced smiles, those histories had collided in front of the entire family. Catherine did not see herself as a replacement for Diana. She saw herself as someone trusted to protect the memories William could not always defend publicly. Through years of private conversations, the prince had explained which jewels carried more than financial value, and which objects remained tied to his mother's deepest joys and sorrows. The royal collection, the group of historic jewels and objects held by the crown, might control those pieces legally. But Catherine understood that grief followed different rules. Camilla saw the same tiara in another way. As queen consort, the wife of the reigning monarch, she had spent years trying to build an identity that did not collapse beneath Diana's shadow. Wearing the wedding piece became her silent declaration that she would no longer accept invisible limits placed around her position. Yet the moment Catherine stopped the banquet, that declaration turned into humiliation. Catherine felt deceived. Weeks earlier, she had personally asked the jewelry office to keep Diana's most intimate pieces away from ceremonial use. Someone had either ignored that request or deliberately overturned it. The princess could accept disagreement. What she could not accept was being assured the boundary would be respected, only to see it broken before the entire family. Camilla gripped the edge of her chair and leaned toward a waiting aide. She said Catherine had transformed a private wardrobe choice into a public attack on her authority. The queen consort expected sympathy, But the aide remained silent. That silence told her the room was no longer moving in her favor. William stood near the corridor, fighting to control his anger. Old photographs of his mother wearing the tiara returned to him with painful force. He stepped beside Catherine and said quietly, "You were right to stop this." The prince did not raise his voice, but his support made the divide impossible to hide. Charles then admitted privately that he had never been shown the final jewelry selection. The king's surprise destroyed any suggestion that he had personally approved Camilla's choice. Anne also recognized the tiara and warned her brother that legal ownership did not erase emotional ownership. Then a senior curator approached William and Catherine. He requested a private meeting and promised to explain how Camilla had gained access to a jewel marked unavailable. The banquet may have been frozen by Catherine's command, but the real crisis had begun weeks earlier inside a locked collection room, where one quiet instruction changed the fate of Christmas night. Long before Catherine entered the banquet, the decision had already been made behind closed doors. It happened during a private jewelry fitting that was never supposed to become controversial. Camilla had been shown several approved pieces, each selected to reinforce her own position. But then she noticed a velvet case placed apart from the others. She asked for it to be opened. The moment the lid rose and Diana's wedding tiara appeared, a warning was given and deliberately ignored. Camilla had entered the fitting 3 weeks before Christmas with one purpose: to choose a historic jewel that carried dignity without reopening old wounds. The royal collection curator, the official responsible for protecting and recording crown-owned treasures, presented several safe options while her personal dresser stood nearby. Diana's tiara had only been brought into the room for a condition inspection. It was never meant to become part of the selection. Camilla noticed the red restriction tag immediately. The label marked the piece as unavailable for ceremonial use, yet she reached into the case and lifted it from the velvet. "Christmas is precisely when old divisions should end," she told the curator. When he explained that Catherine had personally requested the tiara remain untouched, the queen consort's expression hardened. The princess does not control the royal collection. The curator hesitated. He asked for written approval from Charles before preparing the jewel, knowing the king's authorization would protect everyone involved. Camilla did not raise her voice. She simply reminded him that questioning the monarch's wife in front of staff could damage his standing. The warning was quiet, but its meaning was brutal. Camilla's dresser followed her into a private side room and begged her to reconsider. She warned that William would not see the choice as reconciliation. He would see it as an intrusion into his mother's memory. The queen refused. She ordered the tiara cleaned, fitted, and prepared for Christmas night. Camilla then used an old standing access code linked to the sovereign's household. The code allowed senior officials to move approved jewels without requesting fresh permission each time, but it had never been intended to override emotional restrictions. She used it anyway. The curator recorded the restriction in the collection log, the official written record tracking the movement and status of royal objects. He also sent a sealed warning to the palace private secretary. That notice never reached Catherine. Someone inside the household redirected it and marked the issue as resolved. William learned this during the curator's private account. His anger deepened, because Camilla had not acted alone. Someone had protected the choice. What began as defiance during a private fitting had become something far more serious, a chain of pressure, silence, and hidden protection that would force Catherine and Camilla into their first direct confrontation of the night. When Catherine entered the private withdrawing room, Camilla was waiting beside the fireplace with the tiara still on her head. No guests stood between them. No music softened the silence. William remained near the door, while Charles watched from across the room with an expression that revealed neither support nor condemnation. Catherine did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her first sentence cut through years of royal restraint. "You knew exactly what that piece meant." Catherine had requested the private meeting before allowing the banquet to resume. A withdrawing room was a smaller royal chamber used for confidential conversations away from formal guests, and tonight it had become the center of the crisis. Charles, William, and Anne remained because each was directly tied to the dispute. Every aide was sent outside, leaving Camilla without prepared words and Catherine without anyone to soften her demand. "You did not wear it to create unity," Catherine said. "You wore it to take control of a memory that was never yours." She pointed toward the adjoining dressing room and told Camilla to remove the tiara immediately. The princess spoke with restraint, but her anger was unmistakable. Camilla refused to accept the accusation. She told Catherine that Diana's name had become a weapon used whenever someone wanted to limit her position. The queen consort insisted the monarchy could not keep treating the past as sacred whenever it challenged her authority. She accused the princess of turning grief into power. William finally stepped forward. He told Camilla that his mother's wedding symbols were not tools for rewriting history. The prince kept his voice low, but Charles heard the fury beneath every word. Anne watched him closely, knowing he was holding back years of pain. Camilla slowly removed one glove and placed it on the table. Then she remained seated. Her refusal was deliberate. Catherine answered without another argument. She pulled out the banquet chair reserved for the hostess and pushed it back beneath the table, making one thing clear: the evening would not continue under Camilla's control. Charles broke the silence. He asked whether she had known the tiara was restricted before selecting it. Camilla looked toward him, then toward William, but she gave no answer. The pause lasted too long. Anne lowered her eyes. Catherine did not move. Everyone understood the truth. Charles then told Camilla to remove the tiara. She turned toward him in disbelief. In that moment, the queen consort realized the conflict was no longer only with Catherine. It had become a test of whether the king would defend her pride or uphold the boundary she had crossed. Catherine had drawn the line, but Charles now held the power to enforce it, and his next decision would determine whether the crown protected Camilla's pride or Diana's memory. Charles had spent years balancing affection, duty, regret, and survival. On Christmas night, those forces became impossible to separate. His wife stood wounded before him. His eldest son stood rigid with anger. Catherine waited without retreating. The king understood that any choice would carry a cost. Defending Camilla could fracture his relationship with William. Siding against her could expose weakness inside his marriage. Yet refusing to decide would damage the monarchy more than either outcome. Charles alone held the final authority over the royal collection and the future of the banquet. As sovereign, the reigning monarch with the power to make the crown's final decisions, he could end the dispute with a single instruction. Everyone in the room waited for him to turn private pain into an official ruling. That power made his silence heavier, not safer. Anne stepped closer to her brother and spoke without emotion. She reminded him that royal authority was stewardship, not ownership. The crown, meaning the institution and responsibilities of the monarchy, survived only when its treasures were protected with judgment. If personal power erased emotional boundaries, she warned, then tradition would become nothing more than a weapon. Charles walked toward the window and removed his glasses. He remained there while confused guests waited beyond the closed doors. When the king finally turned back, his face showed exhaustion rather than anger. He understood that this decision would follow the family long after Christmas night. Camilla appealed directly to him. She said ordering her to surrender the tiara in front of William would permanently weaken her standing. The queen consort asked whether Diana's memory would always be allowed to overrule his living wife. Her voice trembled, but her challenge was clear. Protect her now or admit that the past still controlled their marriage. William answered before his father could speak. He said the choice was not between Diana and Camilla. It was between honesty and entitlement. The prince warned that silence would not look neutral. It would look like approval. Charles made his decision. He ordered the tiara removed immediately. Then he suspended Camilla's independent access to all restricted royal jewels until a full review could be completed. The king spoke calmly, and that restraint made the ruling even more devastating. Charles also instructed the private secretary, the senior official who manages the monarch's most sensitive business, to identify who had delayed the curator's warning. The argument had now become a formal investigation into palace conduct. Camilla finally rose. Before entering the dressing room, she looked at Charles and said, You have made your choice. The king's ruling protected the evening from complete collapse, yet when the tiara left Camilla's head, another symbol disappeared with it, the certainty that her authority inside the palace remained untouchable. 43 minutes after Catherine stopped the banquet, the doors finally reopened. The musicians began again. Guests returned to their places. Candles still burned. Glasses were refilled, and the official Christmas toast was delivered. Yet nothing had truly resumed. Camilla entered without Diana's tiara, and without the confidence she had carried earlier. Catherine sat beside William in controlled silence. Across the table, Charles realized the ceremony had survived, but the family arrangement beneath it had permanently shifted. Anne had been asked to oversee the ceremonial order, meaning the formal sequence of entrances, seating, and speeches that controlled the banquet. Camilla kept her place at the table, but she no longer led the opening procession. That change mattered, because royal rank was often expressed through small public movements. Tonight, one altered entrance told the family that her authority had been reduced. Guests received a simple explanation. A heritage concern, meaning a problem involving the care or approved use of a historic royal object, had caused the delay. No one mentioned Catherine's demand, William's anger, or the confrontation behind closed doors. The silence protected the monarchy in public, but it could not erase what the family had witnessed. Camilla returned wearing only a diamond necklace. When the guests rose, she paused and expected the welcome to be for her. Then Charles entered behind her, and she understood the applause belonged to the king. The queen consort took her seat without looking toward Catherine. Catherine felt no victory. During the first toast, she stared at her untouched glass and quietly told William that she hated forcing the family into such a public rupture. The princess had protected Diana's memory, but she also knew Christmas would now be remembered for conflict instead of unity. William leaned closer and told her that protecting a boundary was not the same as causing the violation. The prince's reassurance steadied her, yet his own anger remained. Once again, his mother's memory had been pulled into a struggle for palace power. Charles received the next blow during dessert. The private secretary showed him a documented entry proving that Camilla's senior household aide had intercepted the curator's warning and marked it as routine. The aide had acted after direct verbal instructions from the queen consort's office. Charles read the entry twice. The king folded it carefully, rose without explanation, and left the table. Camilla watched him go and understood that the tiara was no longer the only issue. Later that night, she sat alone when Catherine unexpectedly entered without William, Charles, or any official beside her. The banquet had revealed who held ceremonial authority, but the meeting after midnight would reveal something deeper, whether Catherine wanted punishment, reconciliation, or one final truth from Camilla. After the officials withdrew and the palace corridors fell silent, Catherine approached Camilla's private sitting room alone. There were no advisors to control the language, no husbands to intervene, and no audience to reward either woman for appearing strong. Camilla had removed every jewel and sat beside a darkened fireplace. When Catherine entered, the queen consort expected another accusation. Instead, the princess closed the door, remained standing, and asked the question no one else had dared to ask. Why that tiara? Catherine made her purpose clear. She had not come to reverse the king's ruling, and the access suspension would remain. That suspension, a temporary removal of permission to use restricted royal jewels, would continue while officials examined who delayed the curator's warning. The princess also told Camilla that the investigation would not be softened to protect anyone's pride. Camilla finally answered. She admitted in that private conversation that she had chosen the wedding tiara because she wanted to prove Diana's memory no longer controlled how the monarchy judged her. The queen consort believed that wearing it without protest would show the family had moved forward. Instead, the banquet had shown how deeply the past still shaped every decision. Catherine did not comfort her. She said the choice had achieved the opposite of what Camilla intended. By using the tiara as a test of power, she had made herself appear threatened by a woman who had been dead for decades. The princess told her that confidence did not require taking possession of someone else's pain. Camilla's anger began to collapse. She confessed that every major ceremony still felt like a silent comparison. The queen said she had wanted one evening when the palace accepted her without looking backward. For the first time that night, her voice carried humiliation rather than defiance. Catherine sat across from her. She said acceptance could not be forced through another woman's possessions. Camilla lowered her eyes and admitted she had crossed a personal line. The admission did not erase the damage, but it changed the room. Camilla then revealed through that same private conversation that she had almost abandoned the choice after her dresser warned her. Pride took over when she learned Catherine had personally requested the restriction. The queen consort had treated the boundary as a challenge. Camilla agreed to apologize privately to William and surrender all unsupervised access to jewels linked to Diana. Catherine did not offer immediate forgiveness, but she accepted the confession as the first honest response of the night. By morning, however, the palace faced another crisis. The unexplained delay had already drawn public attention. Behind the closed door, pride finally gave way to truth. Outside it, the silence surrounding Christmas night was collapsing under the weight of one unforgettable image. The palace attempted to describe the delay as a routine heritage concern. But one photograph made secrecy impossible. It showed Charles delivering the Christmas toast while the ceremonial chair beside him remained empty. Catherine was visible farther down the table, composed but unsmiling. Camilla appeared only in a later image, without a tiara, and separated from the opening ceremony. By sunrise, Britain understood that something extraordinary had happened, and the nation began choosing what it believed the empty chair represented. Palace communications released a brief statement confirming that the banquet had paused because a jewel required immediate review. The communications office, the team responsible for explaining royal events to the public, avoided naming Diana, Catherine, or Camilla. That silence was meant to contain the crisis. Instead, it created a mystery large enough for the entire country to enter. Broadcasters rebuilt the evening piece by piece. They compared arrival times, guest movements, the unexplained 43-minute delay, and Camilla's sudden change of jewelry. One presenter asked why the queen consort had entered wearing a historic tiara, but returned without it. Another pointed to Catherine's expression during the toast. The missing answers became more powerful than any official statement. Outside Buckingham Palace, the reaction turned deeply personal. Supporters gathered beneath the Christmas decorations and placed white roses beside the gates in Diana's memory. One woman held a handwritten sign that read, "Some things are not yours to rewrite." The message spread across television screens and captured the public mood in a single sentence. Camilla faced an even harsher blow when a major newspaper published two images side by side. The first showed her arriving in the wedding tiara. The second showed her returning without it. Across the front page, the headline declared, "The crown that Christmas rejected." Catherine's supporters praised her for defending William and protecting Diana's emotional legacy. Critics argued that stopping a royal banquet had turned private grief into a constitutional spectacle, meaning a family dispute had become a public test of royal authority. The nation divided over the method, but few misunderstood the reason. William watched the morning broadcast beside Catherine. When the prince saw the white roses at the palace gates, he took her hand and told her the public understood why she acted, even without knowing every detail. The princess said nothing, but the tension in her face finally softened. Charles then authorized confirmation that Camilla's independent jewelry access had been suspended. The king refused to discuss blame, yet the announcement made one fact clear: Catherine's intervention had been upheld. The world had turned an empty chair and a vanished tiara into symbols of judgment. Now the monarchy had to decide what lesson would survive after the headlines faded. The Christmas banquet did not end with a resignation, an exile, or the destruction of the royal family. Its consequence was quieter and more permanent. Catherine proved that ceremonial rank could not erase emotional responsibility. Camilla discovered that authority did not grant ownership over every symbol inside the crown. William saw his mother's memory defended without anger consuming the evening. And Charles finally accepted that peace could not be preserved by asking the wounded to remain silent, while boundaries were deliberately crossed. Charles completed the internal review and permanently removed Diana's wedding tiara from general ceremonial circulation. Restricted family stewardship meant the jewel would now be protected for its personal meaning and could no longer be treated like an ordinary royal accessory. The king understood that ownership alone could never explain what the piece represented to William, or why Catherine had risked public conflict to defend it. Camilla lost all unsupervised access to emotionally sensitive jewels. She accepted the restriction and sent William a private written apology, admitting that she had used his mother's memory to settle an argument about her own place in the family. The queen consort did not ask him to forget what happened. She only acknowledged that pride had driven her beyond a boundary she had no right to cross. Catherine felt no desire to celebrate. Days later, she entered the collection room with William and stood before the closed velvet case. The princess told him that silence would have made the violation appear acceptable. She had not stopped Christmas to humiliate Camilla. She had stopped it because some wounds become deeper when everyone agrees to pretend they are not there. William thanked her. The prince admitted that defending Diana himself would always be dismissed as grief, anger, or unfinished pain. Catherine had done something he could not do without reopening every judgment attached to his mother's name. She had protected not only a jewel, but the emotional limits that a modern monarchy could no longer ignore. Camilla emerged with less authority but greater honesty. Her apology did not erase the choice, yet it ended her attempt to defeat Diana's legacy through possession. Charles also accepted his part. The king recognized that avoiding conflict had allowed dangerous uncertainty to grow, and by supporting Catherine, he finally chose accountability over temporary peace. At the next family gathering, Catherine and Camilla entered separately. No jewel linked to Diana was worn. The queen consort paused beside the princess and offered a restrained nod. Catherine returned it not as forgiveness, but as recognition that the boundary had finally been accepted. Christmas night began with a tiara intended to demonstrate power, but it ended by proving something stronger: the crown may control the jewels. Yet memory belongs to those who carry its deepest wounds. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.